Hey Keith, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really well today, Corey. How are you?
I'm doing well also, and I'm really excited to be back here with you again for yet another episode of Wit and Wisdom. God, we just continue pumping these things out, man.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And it's a
And
lot
I,
of fun.
it is a lot of fun. I really every month I look forward to the conversations that we have together. And today's no different. Today, what we're going to be talking about, well, among other things, we actually have, I think you've got quite a few things in your bag for us today. But really, this started about sort of a back and forth you and I were having an email, basically about how to cultivate more resilience in the face of just a tidal wave of misinformation that we are constantly surrounded by. And,
Mhm.
just before the show started, you and I were having a little chat about, it's not just the sort of little epistemic bubbles that we create for ourselves, seeking out communities that only, confirm our biases and presuppositions and all that. So it's not only this thing that we're sort of consciously choosing into, selecting ourselves into, but there's also, like, in the lower right quadrant, just out of all of our control, these algorithmic bubbles that are reinforcing our various confirmation biases and so forth. And these can get really tricky because they're actually taking you down sort of a rabbit hole of information. And once you get down that rabbit hole, past a certain point, it's really hard to climb your way back out. And I think we're seeing that today. A lot of people who maybe otherwise would want to climb out of sort of the rabbit holes they find themselves in, but simply can't due to any number of pressures, interior pressure, sort of cultural pressure of the people that they're now surrounded by. And again, these sort of algorithmic pressures where you watch one crazy YouTube video and it just leads you to an even crazier YouTube video, which leads you all the way back down the rabbit hole again. So this is a tremendously important topic that I think speaks directly to one of the central life conditions of our time.
I agree. I agree. And I think it's important to recognize that all cognition is motivated cognition. All reasoning is motivated reasoning. You sent me a great article which started this off. And this was a researcher and a group of people who looked at South Africa, I think a South American country, I think it was Venezuela, the United States, and one other country. And they found that there were mechanisms in the social sphere that made people more credible. And one thing about motivated reasoning, for instance, repetition makes people more credible. Also, if you present something in a matter of fact and in a professorial way, if you use type that looks professional, if you got graphics look professional, that makes people more believable. For instance, anybody with an English accent is more credible than people without anybody with an Oxford accent is more credible than anybody else. I remember listening to a guy with an Oxford accent talking about how there were aliens that were on the other side of the sun that were influencing us. And I was going along, I was going, okay, my emotions are saying, wow, aliens on the other side of the sun influencing us. And it's just, the melodious, so that makes people more credible.
Real briefly, Keith, I experienced the same thing to be true. For whatever reason, I've been really getting into watching various like STEM related videos on YouTube, engineering and physics. I really love physics videos. And I noticed that for whatever reason, if I'm watching a British guy explaining these really complicated ideas to me, I find more legitimacy in it, sort of unconsciously, which is interesting.
So that's another thing that makes people more credible. And then another thing is all our myriad conditioned biases. Now, and those are all coming from the unconscious. Now, this is a big deal. And it's not all a bad thing. We're not going to stop all the drives, all the instincts, all our previous learnings, all our biases, influencing our decision-making, influencing our reactions and that kind of stuff. But if our goal is to serve the highest good, if our goal is to find what's most beautiful, good, and true, then we can welcome all these influences and see, judging from certain criteria that we're going to talk about in a little bit, whether they're consistent with our values, our principles. For instance, any system that encourages me, or any message that encourages me to categorically dismiss any individual or group, I'm suspicious of. So any message that causes me to objectify another person, where they don't deserve the same kind of rights and treatment that I deserve, I'm suspicious of that reaction. Any reaction that involves me wanting to punish somebody rather than rehabilitate if there's a problem, or repair. Okay? And so we can develop habits of consciousness that cause us to see when we're responding to various conditions, to veer from our values. And then those new habits work their way into the unconscious, and the unconscious becomes wiser. And if you look into the literature on motivational reasoning, every time that I go into an academic area, I become grateful once again for Integral. I go, thank you, Ken. Because if you go into Flatland and look at this stuff, there's a lot of categories and so on. But what there isn't is that the adaptive unconscious, which I call the shadow self, has an intelligence. It has a motivation beyond survival and reproduction. There's a wise self. And the wise self wants to serve the highest good. The wise self wants to serve love. And the more that we grow, the more coherent that part of us becomes, the more powerful it becomes in our decision making. And so we want to have motivated reasoning along those lines. In post-issue relationships, we are cultivating motivated reasoning. In a post-issue relationship, I am cultivating an understanding of you as somebody that is always doing their best to do right. And if you appear to do something that I find morally repugnant, I'm going to assume that I'm misinterpreting what's going on and that you have a positive motivation. And in a post-issue relationship, that's exactly the right thing to do. And then to go back and forth until we can find a way for us both to be right, or to disagree in a way that's interesting to both of us, or acceptable to both of us. So it's not that motivated reasoning and influence is a bad thing. Okay? Now, we can divide the world up to a certain extent into all the healers and seekers, and then into the people that want power over other people. Almost like the growth hierarchy people and the dominator hierarchy people. And where the danger comes from all this is in the dominator hierarchy people. And since we live in a culture that's based, the United States is based on extractive capitalism. Extractive capitalism is a wide array of dominator hierarchies wanting to influence us to give them money, give them attention, give them our vote, and give them a pass if they screw up. I don't know, Exxon. It's not me that's screwing up the energy companies, that's screwing up the environment. It's people not understanding that we're just trying to make everybody happy, and like that, okay? Oh, wow, Exxon. I didn't realize you were such good guys. Like that. So the motivated reasoning that we want to address is that, where we're trying to be manipulated, where someone's trying to get something from us, where especially someone's trying to get us to do some kind of damage. Now, from a psychotherapy standpoint, I want to use all the methods that we're going to talk about to help people grow. For instance, here's one motivated reasoning thing. A first impression has a huge impact if it's negative. We have a human negativity bias, and there's a reason that we have a negativity bias. From the very beginning of life on this planet, there's been emotion, and the emotion has been attraction or repulsion. And that just works its way up from the very beginning, from the first cells on Earth to right now. And if something is a little bit alarming or a little bit dangerous, we want to back away from it. Mm-hmm. And that takes precedence over something being great. Okay? And that's a bias that everybody has, all living things have, and we have. It's a negativity bias. Now, that really worked well for evolution until it hit humans. Why is it that's so much more difficult for us? Well, unlike all the other creatures, we can project to the end of time. We can project to the beginning of time. We can remember stuff. We can make up stuff. And so when we're little kids, we learn that when we focus on a problem, we can solve it. That focusing on a problem gives us relief. So before we can develop the formal operational capacity to critically evaluate problems, we develop the habit of either focusing on a problem and worrying about it, that's obsessing, or completely avoiding it, dissociating from it, pretending like it's not there. Mm-hmm. And in nervous system years, by the time we're 12, 13, 14 and are formal operational, our nervous system has had an eternity to strengthen those particular habits. And so that habit of obsessing needs to be addressed with conscious awareness. And part of that is being aware that I'm being influenced by my habit of worrying about a problem rather than doing something else. And then what you need to do, because of the way nervous systems are organized, you need to develop another habit that includes and transcends the previous one. Why? We've discovered that brains do not give up things that are associated with survival. That includes the defenses. That's motivated reasoning. Mm-hmm. Also, as humanity has expanded and the capacities have expanded, there are new capacities for damage in motivated reasoning that we're discovering. For instance, at the end of the 19th century, there was a philosopher, I forget his name, who said that there's going to be a lot of problems in the next century. With mass formation psychosis. And he didn't use that term. That term is from Matthias de May, a Flemish psychologist. And so let me explain that just for a second.
Yeah, please.
So mass formation influencing or psychosis.